Hey there, welcome back to Pepper Geek. In today's video, I want to share 5 pepper seedling mistakes to avoid this year. Now, we've made a lot of mistakes growing peppers through the years, so I want to share some simple mistakes that you can avoid this year to keep your plants healthy until they go outside. So jumping right in, number 1 is not using a fan to circulate air around your plants. This may seem overly simple, but it's a really important thing that we do every time we're growing plants indoors. And what it does is 3 really important things. The first is it helps dry out the surface of your soil pretty quickly so that you don't have your plants sitting in a very moist and overly humid environment, which can lead to an abundance of algae growth on the surface of the soil, but also pathogens like bad funguses, which can lead to problems with your seedlings. One of those things is damping off disease, which is caused by a fungus, which thrives in cool and damp conditions. So the fan helps circulate air around and prevents those pathogens from taking a good foothold. It also helps create strong stems in your pepper plants. So this seedling here was off to a very leggy start, but after just a day or two under the breeze of our fan, it perked right back up and was stronger than ever. And while it's not ideal that you let your plants get leggy, that breeze that you're providing with the fan will help strengthen the stems. And lastly, the airflow will help provide oxygen to the root systems of your plants, which they need to grow very strong and healthy early on. Number 2 pepper seedling mistake is over-fertilizing. Now, we do recommend using a seed starter mix rather than a potting soil when you're planting your seeds, but it usually doesn't have any fertilizer in it, meaning that you have to provide a little bit of nutrition. But a little bit goes a really long way with pepper seedlings, so you want to start with half strength or even a quarter strength of whatever the manufacturer recommends on your fertilizer. So this may not seem like enough, but trust me, it's better to start with less than more because too much nitrogen in the soil, especially available nitrogen like in a liquid fertilizer, can cause the leaves to actually burn. Just as important is if you are using a potting soil which has nutrients built in, make sure that you're not fertilizing at all until you're sure the nutrients in the soil have been used up. So our Fox Farm Happy Frog is usually enough nutrients to get our plants all the way through to transplanting outside without fertilizing at all. Before we continue, we wanted to talk about BOOTSTRAP Farmer, one of our favorite garden supply brands and the sponsor of today's video.
We've been using BOOTSTRAP Farmer for many years, and we've always been really impressed with the quality and longevity of their products.
They make everything you would need to grow peppers from seed all the way to harvest with their 6-cell trays, their seedling trays and humidity domes, various sized pots, and of course their different sized grow bags.
So there's a couple of features that we really like, especially with the design of their 6-cell seed trays. They have these air pruning slits, as well as these extra large drainage holes at the bottom, which make transplanting so much easier. And we love that these trays are made in the USA.
So go check out what BOOTSTRAP has to offer. They have a lot more products than just what you see here. Thanks again to BOOTSTRAP Farmer for sponsoring this video and supporting the pepper growing community. Next up is providing inadequate light. So you see behind me, we have our grow lights set up. We have a stack of grow lights above me as well. And while this is probably overkill for most growers, you do want to make sure that as soon as your pepper seedlings sprout, you get them under some sort of light. But if you can't justify buying a grow light for just a few plants, then make sure that you're providing as much natural sunlight as possible. So get your trays right up against a south-facing window if you're in the northern hemisphere, and get rid of any objects that might cast shade onto the plants if you can. If you want a really cheap option, there is a pretty nice little clip-on light that we found on Amazon that actually has a built-in timer and 4 different lights that you can sort of aim at your plants. And while the quality isn't as good as some of the lights you see here, it can provide some of that additional light that your plants will thank you for. If you are using grow lights, some quick tips on that. We generally recommend 16 hours of light every day, 8 hours of darkness, and make sure you read the instructions on your grow light because usually they'll provide some information on hanging height above your plants. If you start to see the leaves curling up like a taco shell, that is an indication that they're too close to the lights, so back them off or lower the intensity. And if you see them growing tall and lanky, sort of stretching up to the lights, that's an indication that they're not close enough, so again, adjust the lights as needed. Next pepper seedling mistake is pruning without a plan. So we have a video about pruning peppers. It's one of our more popular videos, and it details the process of sort of topping off your plants, clipping off the first couple of inches of the plant in hopes of generating a stronger, sort of bushier plant. And while this is certainly true in the short term, it will lead to more lower growth on the plant. But in the long run, we haven't really seen any benefit from pruning our plants. And that's why we don't prune our plants for the most part. We plan on doing more experimenting with this year, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend blindly pruning your plants just because it's an option. More important is planting your seeds at the right time so that they're not becoming root bound, they're not spending too much time indoors when they're large enough and they're ready to get outside. This is an example of a plant that was not pruned, but at first glance you might think that it was. It started to naturally bush out and create this lovely canopy, and you can see it forked right in the center and created sort of a Y shape. And this is what most pepper plants do naturally. They grow for a month or two, and then they start to fork off and become more bushy naturally. So hopefully we'll have a video soon with a little more detail on the results you can expect from pruning. So make sure you're subscribed for that video because it's going to be really interesting. We're also going to be talking about other types of pruning techniques, not just topping the top of the plants off, but training your peppers to grow in certain ways for higher yields. So the final mistake you should avoid with your pepper seedlings is failing to harden off. I see this every single year with newer gardeners. They get their plants outside, they're excited for the warm weather and the natural sunlight, but they quickly find that their pepper leaves are turning white and crispy and burning in the sun. And that's exactly what's happening. The sun is burning the leaves. It's very similar to a sunburn. Your indoor plants are tender and weak. They can't really handle that direct sunlight. So what's necessary is gradually adjusting your plants to the outdoor elements, bringing them outside for increasing periods of time until they can handle full sun. We have a video all about hardening off, so if you want to learn that process, it's really pretty simple. I'll leave a link to that video below. Now for a few quick tips about pepper seedlings. Number one is that you should always thin out your peppers so that there's only one plant per cell. If you plant multiple seeds in a single cell, there's a good chance that all of them are going to sprout, so you want to thin out the weakest of the bunch, leaving one plant the strongest one. Another similar tip is that you can actually save all of the seedlings if you want. If you have the space to grow out all of those individual plants, you can gently tease apart the root systems of those plants and transplant them into their own pots. Another important tip is to always transplant your seedlings as soon as they're ready. As soon as those roots begin to curl around the bottom of the pots, or the roots have really begun to fill out the pots, they're reaching the bottom and all the sides, transplant them right away so that the roots can continue growing into more soil and naturally grow larger over time. Another tip is to not overwater your seedlings. I always recommend bottom watering, so pouring the water around the base of the plants and allowing the soil to suck it up. But make sure you get rid of any excess water. It's easy to overdo it, put too much water into the basin, and then the roots are just sitting there in water with wet feet. They don't like that. Another tip is to monitor for pests, so make sure you have some yellow sticky traps hanging around your seedlings, capturing fungus gnats or thrips or aphids or whatever might be present in your grow area, but also make sure that you're actually looking at the plants themselves, underneath the leaves, at the new foliage to see what might be lurking there. And the final tip is to just be patient. Don't be too put off by slow growth. Young pepper seedlings really grow slowly, even some of the faster growing varieties. The seedlings aren't going to do too much in their first couple weeks of growth. You will see them accelerate in growth over time, so before you know it, your plants will be doubling in size every few days, and that's really when things get exciting. So just have faith that slow growing tiny seedlings are doing just fine. I hope you found this video helpful. Make sure you leave a like on it and leave a comment if you have any other mistakes to avoid. Thanks for watching Pepper Geek, and I'll see you next time.